Keep your hands and head inside the vehicle at all times. Buckle your seatbelts, check your mirrors, sit on back and relax. It's lights out and away we go for the Tall and Short of It podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tall and Short of It podcast, coming to you under the holiday lights. I'm your host, Justin.
And I'm Aaron. Welcome back for another week of the podcast. We've got a lot coming for you. We've got a little F1 off-season talk, a Formula One classic race review of the 2002 Australian Grand Prix, some League of Legends and off-season chatter, and then, of course, a little Magic the Gathering. Justin, it's good to see you. We've got a pretty full episode ahead.
Yeah, good to see you too, my friend. While my notes may not be that full, you're right. We actually do have a decent bit to get through. But yeah, it's been quite the week here. Now, give me your rose thorn seed. How have you been doing?
I've been doing pretty good. So for my rose this week, it's just been I've like really recognized how much I enjoy having Senna around. It's been a lot of fun. She's going through a little bit of a terrible twos phase for a couple things. She's still a little bitey, so she's teething a bit and trying to avoid that, but and she gets still super high energy sometimes, but it's pretty funny to kind of watch. So overall, everything else has been amazing. So it's just been a lot of fun having her around, and she's growing like quickly.
Very cool. Now, how's the mobility on the hardwood floors? Does she like?
She does fine.
That's good.
She kind of occasionally, like, I'll play with her and I'll like she likes to like run and kind of pounce at you. So I'll like catch her and slide her backwards on her paws like across the kitchen floor, and then she'll just like come sprinting back at me and like jump at me again. It just
Oh, that's adorable.
Yeah, so she does pretty well on it. She's figured out how to jump up to the couch a couple of times, so it's not a huge like concern yet. She's been pretty good with the new couch, hasn't torn it up or anything, so
Nice.
we're happy. But every now and then when she gets the zoomies, she'll like really get a good launch off the ground and just like clear up to on top of the couch.
Oh, wow.
Or like on the seat, which
Sure.
normally she just kind of like jumps up to it, is like puts her paws there. She's like, no, too high. But when she doesn't think about it, she like gets up there.
Oh, wow. So she has some verticality here.
Oh yeah, she loves to jump.
Oh, wow.
Like,
We got to get her in the Airbud League.
Seriously, she might be a little too small, but she jumps pretty well.
Nice.
So it's been a lot of fun. My thorn for this week is that Colleen and I have just been a tidbit under the weather. Nothing too bad, just it seems like a cold, both of us, sinuses and pressure and whatever. So it's never fun being sick, but I'm just glad it wasn't too bad. And I took a day off today anyway, just as like I need to use this day before the end of the year, gonna relax. So I think having that relaxation kind of helps with the not feeling as well. You kind of recover a little bit. But my seed kind of ties into that as well. So taking the day off today, I did a pretty good job not really stressing about work, just letting things be as they were. I ended up getting a couple of emails at the end of the day that I had to address just because they didn't happen during the day. But outside of that, I was able to chill, and I'm usually not the best at like leaving and just kind of letting work be. So I was glad to kind of just be able to relax a bit more because I needed it. So,
Well, you're in more of a manager position, right?
yeah. So,
Well, there you go. it's not that like easy to if you're the only one that like people can reach out to. At a certain point, you gotta be a little flexible with what you're willing to field on like the
Definitely.
off hours.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, which is why I like hopped on and dealt with a couple things like at the end of the day now.
Mm-hmm.
But for the majority of the day, I just kind of got to chill, hang out with the pup,
Nice.
and relax. So it was solid. But that's enough about my week. How has your week been? What's been going on?
It's going pretty well, I have to say. Couple interesting things here. I'll start with my seed. So Sarah and I have been talking. Well, we had we've been looking for a way to get like body work done without having to like bother each other at the end of work days where like she's already done 3 massages or like I've done 2 or whatever it is. So we put a plan in place, or we move forward on a plan to talk to somebody we know and say, hey, instead of trading, can we just like pay you, come to the office like to work on me and Sarah, so it's like kind of easy for everybody. And she seemed very interested in
Hmm.
that, to where like, because normally between therapists the thing would be like, hey, like, do you want to do a trade, like I'll work on you, you work on me, but at the end of the day, like, I don't want to work. I just want to get a massage, right?
Yeah.
So we thought this would be a nice way to just say like, hey, we're not trying to make you do anything extra. We want to pay you for your expertise, and like not make anything weird. We just want to say, hey, we would love to utilize your services if you're down. So
Yeah.
that has gone. So that went pretty well, and now it's just going to be a matter of getting it in the books. So we're looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a good thing.
Nice. That's solid. And that way, like, I think that makes sense as opposed to like trading. Because I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that would be fine to do that. But if you're like, I
Mm-hmm.
just want to chill and like kind of get some muscles and whatever worked on, hey, you want the business or not? Like that's a pretty thing because the other person can decide like, oh, nah, I'm not in. Like that's fine. Or
Right.
to be like, yeah, I'll take the business.
Mm-hmm.
What's another couple massages on my books for the week?
Yeah, and like not trying to get a rate or anything like this. Just say like, hey, we would just like to employ you.
Yeah,
So yeah, looking forward to that. And then my thorn here for the week, it's more of a just kind of like a little bit of a recap here. I guess kind of for the year. So it's been kind of an interesting year for, I would say, solutions. We've done a lot this year that has kind of like revamped old systems, or like made a couple key purchases that have allowed us to like make a few changes or improve where we've been maybe just like we actually didn't have an idea of what we were supposed to do. We just kind of did it this way and like, whatever, not think about it. But this year has been, looking back, a year of a lot of different solutions. Like some of the big ones are we got a paper shredder for like sensitive documents, so we aren't afraid to just like throw them out. We can just shred them and get rid of them instead of feeling like maybe we got to keep these for whatever reason. We can just get rid of them. Another one that we really enjoy is the gift certificate little system that I set up. Now that we have some actual time utilizing it, like in practice, it's been working really well for us to like do bookkeeping a little better. So yeah, just looking back over the year, me and Sarah have done a decent amount of good work to remove thorns from our process, and
nice.
hopefully just like kind of improve in different ways. I couldn't really think of something that was like getting at me this week, so I just thought like, maybe recap, like think over the year what came up. But yeah, I think me and her did a really good job of just like solving problems in general. So yeah,
No, that's
kind of
good.
kind of excited about that.
Yeah, and it's funny because there's always gonna be little things that you can find and like do, but a lot of the things that you guys put in, I think, are were big in like getting set up, and now that those things can run smoothly and are in place, like that frees up more time and mental energy from you guys to either look at other things or be like, hey, like now we get to relax a little bit more because we feel like we've gotten, like we don't have anything on our list of this is what we need
Right.
to do right now. So
Right. Nothing that's like urgent, hanging over our head, things like this.
yeah.
So yeah, a beautiful thing in my opinion. And then my rose here for the week. I came across a mod that I'm super excited to try out. It's called the Shutoko Revival Project. It's for the game Assetto Corsa. It's a it's a recreation of a highway system in Japan, and it
Okay.
has
And
like
what's it called?
it's called the Shutoko Revival Project, and there's a couple of like mod folders and stuff you got to set up. But overall, the idea is instead of like racing on a track against opponents, you can just kind of chill out and just like drive on what is effectively just like an endless highway that's populated
Oh.
with other like slow moving cars. You can see the skyline in the distance, and it seems fucking awesome.
And you
I'm
can
super
like just
excited.
go off on different exits onto other roads, and are
Yep.
there like cities you can drive through and stuff?
I don't think it's that. I don't think it's that expansive, but the map or the track, I guess you would say, is pretty large, and there's like some good like dynamic directions that you can go to like loop yourself back and whatever. So yeah, it just seems really fun, and I'm super excited to try it. I got it all set up last night, and I should have some free time over the holidays to really give it a whirl and just kind of zone out behind the wheel. I'm kind of very excited to do that. So that is my
Well,
rose here for the week.
you guys don't drive too much, do you?
No, because we are in walking distance
That's what
of
I
the
thought.
business.
Yeah. So
So
it's like
we like
grocery
any ex.
store, like yeah.
Mm-hmm. And like walking Sasha and stuff. So that's a definite downside of the setup, but there's a lot of pros. However, yeah, I don't get to drive a whole lot, so this may be a fun way to do that when gas prices are skyrocketing. But yeah, super excited about it. That's my rose thorn seed here for the week.
Nice. Very cool. I'm interested to hear how you like that because it's funny for me because I do drive like 40 minutes each way, and it's like frustrating some day. Like some days it's fine, but some days it's like frustrating and I'm annoyed. I'm like I just want to get home. So it's funny for me to think about like doing a driving simulator
Mm,
kind of game, but that it sounds. I
a
hope you enjoy
commute
it.
simulator.
Yeah.
There you go.
I hope you enjoy it. Yeah, commute simulator with people driving up the shoulder past you and all. Like
Dude, that's brutal. That really is a frustrating move.
those are the things that like really get me. But
Hmm.
anyway, on to some of the topics of conversation for the episode. So
Let's do it.
couple Formula One off-season things. So it was talked about. We thought it would happen. Mercedes brought Mick Schumacher on as a reserve driver.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of that. I think it's good and will hopefully give him another opportunity, whether that is with a Williams team or another Mercedes engine team at some point down the road, or who knows what could happen. But I think it's good for him to still be around. I think he is valuable, like team member, so that's pretty cool.
Now, do you know when did there's what feels like a link between the Williams team and the Mercedes team. Obviously, Williams is buying their engines from Mercedes, so that's a partnership of sorts. But when did that kind of marriage start? Because when we get to our classic race review, Williams is a BMW powered team at that point. So, do you know when that marriage happened?
So I think it's just primarily because of the engine partner relationship and then a couple of different driver moves over the past little bit, along.
Okay.
So like with, um, Valtteri Bottas, I don't know if he was part of the Mercedes driver academy, but bringing Valtteri from Williams over to Mercedes to replace Nico Rosberg in 2017. So that's one partnership there, kind of. And then, of course, with George Russell being a Mercedes junior driver, driving for Williams, and then being kind of their reserve or like sub driver. There's kind of at least a friendly relationship there, at least as what it seems. So, um,
Hmm.
so
So it was 2010 where Valtteri was assigned test driver for Williams, drove Williams from 2013 to 2016, and then into the Mercedes. So again, another partnership there,
yeah,
as
so
old as 2010.
yeah, so I think that there's like some just general connections between the two, because if you are providing the engine, there's going to be like conversations and all. Just like I think with, um, I mean, like think back to the original Netflix Drive to Survive season and how much Renault and Red Bull were like they were working together because Red Bull used Renault's engines to some extent. So
Okay,
like so there was
that's a good
that
example.
whole like tension about Red Bull's not going to use their engines anymore. They're going with Honda and the Renault. I can't think of his name. The very like the thin French like guy, who's their team principal, was like always making like unhappy remarks at Christian Horner and whatnot. So I feel like because of the engine partnerships, it's a lot more communication between the teams than you would typically have. So I think that's
Gotcha.
like kind of where that connection goes a bit.
Hmm.
So
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, to your point about Mick Schumacher, yeah, I think it seems as though Mercedes believes that his time in Formula One is not over. They believe that he can offer help in some way, and that's that reserve driver slot. So I think that's interesting, that they kind of give him another home here, where Haas went with a different option.
yeah,
We'll see kind of what it brings. Obviously, the reserve driver slot, it's not something we hear of too often. Obviously, we may see him in the garage or the pen, or say like, oh, Mick was driving on the sim this weekend for whatever
yeah.
it was. But yeah, I mean, we're not going to hear much about it. I think it's cool that he gets to stick around the Formula One paddock, because it's got to be where he believes he belongs. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and I could see him getting to participate occasionally in like some of the race day like broadcast type things. Like they'll sometimes have F2 drivers or other people from
Hmm.
around the grid come and just be on a segment or something like that. So it's definitely like we may see him here and there, but like you said, it's probably not going to be as much as we have been used to, of course, but definitely good. Another thing though with Mick, he and Sebastian Vettel are going to be teaming up for the Race of Champions Nations Cup in Sweden 2023. So the Race of Champions is essentially a elimination style tournament where drivers go in and they drive in equal machinery, unlike you would in like F1 or IndyCar where things have been changed. So like perfectly equal machinery, and it's just who is like the best driver. The Race of Champion Nations Cup is teams that are pairings from different countries that are going to compete to see which country is like
That's cool.
the best. So
So they're
I
the Germany pair.
so they're the Germany pair, and so it's interesting. It's apparently been going on since 1999 for the Nations Cup at least, and so it's it's pretty cool that they'll be doing it. Michael and Seb Vettel won 6 straight Race of Champions Nations Cup titles.
Wow.
So
That's pretty impressive.
yeah, so it's cool that Michael and Seb did it, and now Mick and Seb will get to do it together. That's neat.
Very cool. That family name is obviously strong in the racing community, and now we're learning not just in Formula One too. They have dominance in another, I guess you would say, like, event.
Yeah, another kind of racing series or something like another racing pursuit, because it's kind of it's interesting as opposed to I think of it similar to like doing like Le Mans 24 hour or something like that.
That's a one-shot race, though. This sounds like it's a series of them.
Yeah, so it's I don't know how many teams are in it, but I briefly was touching up on it. It looks interesting. It looks like there's going to be like driving in snow and different conditions. So
that's cool.
So it'll be cool if I can find any videos and highlights of it. But thought it would be a neat thing to mention. I think it'll be early this coming year, but like during the off season still.
Gotcha. Well, good luck to the German team there of Seb and Mick Schumacher.
Yeah. Then the only other kind of off-season note I had was that Toto was being asked a little bit about what his thoughts were on Matteo Binotto and his exit from Ferrari. He said that it was probably the unavoidable happened, but he held on to it longer than I thought. So I think similar to our thoughts about doing the dual position of like team principal and what is it, like director, engineering
technical director, I believe
technical
it is.
director, that Toto's like, that's too much for one person. Like he was probably being pulled apart pretty hard. So it makes sense. It is probably a bummer for, I mean, for all I know, Matteo Binotto could just be like, I'm just going to take my piles of money that I got for this job and I'm going to go and like live on an island somewhere. But I think it is tough to kind of be in that position too, and be just like relied upon for everything, and until the point that you're just like, can't do it anymore.
Well, it's similar to athletes, I imagine, where their shelf life is not infinite. It is a pressure cooker of an environment, one that I likely don't even understand how much of a pressure cooker it is. Like, even in calling it that, I probably truly have no clue, right? So if you have to do that for, I mean, it's damn near like 11 months out of the year. You know, they get some time off, but when you actually listen to these team principals talk, they have very little time with their families because it's right back to the solution for the following year, right? They're back in the factory. They're having conversations with all of their teams and departments. So you're not getting much of a break. So just from a human perspective, I can understand why somebody would just be like, "Yep, all right, I'm done." You know, you can't expect to do it for an extended amount of time, especially when you're not like winning to the degree that the morale is being like boosted and bootstrapped, and it's like, yeah, Matteo, you're the man, let's do it, we're running hard. Like, when you're the guy that all the tomatoes are constantly being thrown at, I mean, what is your shelf life going to be? And then you've got 10 hats on that you've got to wear almost simultaneously at all times
Yeah.
for
Well,
those full 11 months. I mean,
and that
what are you going to do?
the multiple hats get you more tomatoes thrown at you too. It's just like yeah, I think a pressure cooker is like a good explanation, cuz especially, and I think the thing that I can't quite comprehend is in professional sports that the fans are such a crazy part of it.
They're so
Like
cruel to the organizations they claim to love.
that is like the expectations, especially for a team like Ferrari, has to be even so much more pressure than any of the other teams. Like I think the smaller teams like the Haas's or the Williams, like their team principal or their technical director are just have to report basically to the owner, like, hey, this is what I'm doing with your investment into this, like, I think that this is going to lead us to like be more successful and like give you a return on investment. Like for those teams don't have as large groups and large fan bases. For the rest of like F1, the fan bases are like for Ferrari, for Red Bull, for Mercedes are like massive. So you have all of that pressure added on to the pressure of already that every other team principal or technical director has. So it's just even more weight.
Yeah, and it's so, and to put a lens onto Ferrari specifically, like it's not just like the fan base of this Formula One team. It is a national, like, it's a national spectacle. Like they
Yeah.
are, not only are they answering like to the fans, it feels like when they talk about it, they feel as though they're letting like all of Italy down.
Yeah.
And then when you know that these races and like what goes on in the paddock with these team principals, it's like being covered on like morning television on Monday in
Yeah.
these countries, to a degree that it's not unless you're watching, like, unless you're watching ESPN. But these races are just on, are just like on like the cable news effectively.
Yeah, we just see them on Sundays for races, and then outside of that, I have to get my news online. Like, I'm not
Right,
seeing
right.
F1 like news talks during the week.
But it's something that they see like kind of in a local capacity. So
Yeah,
not only are you answering to people that like are avidly watching the team, but just like some guy eating cereal is like, oh, this Bonotto guy, we haven't won in, and like, my man, you
yeah,
haven't watched a race in 3 years. Like, come on. But like, that's the guy that's still yelling at the TV. That is
yeah.
a totally different kind of system, that or a that's a totally different kind of fan and national pride system that the Ferrari team has set up over anybody else. Like,
That's fair.
you don't hear Lewis Hamilton like answering to the fans. You don't hear, I mean, for Max, there's like the Orange Army or whatever, but that has like just started to like form as he's
Right.
like winning these races. I mean, the Tifosi is like,
Oh yeah, it's like you're born part of the Tifosi. Like you are.
that's what I'm saying. And
Yeah.
this is what that guy had to deal with. It's
Oh
like,
yeah.
dude, no wonder. Take a walk, my man. You earned it.
Oh yeah. That
That's how
had to
I
be tough.
feel.
So I hope he I hope he gets to be a part of as much of F1 as he wants to be, and if not, then hey, like good for him. On to whatever's next. But yeah, I thought Toto's comment, I'm like, yeah, that's probably about right. It was just kind of the inevitable coming to pass that eventually he was gonna get burned out, or the pressure was gonna be overwhelming, or whatever it is.
And he may have knowledge of, like, these individuals know each other intimately. So that may be knowledge from conversations that they've had privately from
Oh,
Toto's angle.
definitely. So
Yeah.
it makes sense, and yeah, just hope Matteo Binotto finds whatever's next, and that maybe whoever Ferrari brings in will be able to support the two roles separately. Hopefully they have two people come in to kind of fill those positions and all. So it'll be interesting to see, but we did have a classic race review that we wanted to get into as well from this past week. We watched the 2002 Foster's Australian Grand Prix. Very crazy one again. We've picked some of the more interesting ones during our F1 off season to watch. So a very crazy start to this one.
Yeah, and so this is in, like you had said, this is in Australia. This is at I believe at the time they called it the Melbourne Circuit. I know it as Albert Park, and I don't know when that name changed, but it's the same course. It may have changed over the years, but the same location.
Yeah.
But yeah, very interesting race. And now this is a note of just like sign of the times, kind of bringing back, like you said, we're in 2002 now. Their dry tires have grooves in them.
Yeah, so I was thinking about looking up, but I didn't end up taking the time to look into it. I think they were Bridgestone at the time. Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
And so whatever the research and development was, and as I understand it, there was a time in Formula One where it wasn't all the same tire producer.
Yeah.
Like you could use
So
different tires.
I think there was a time where they had Bridgestone and Pirelli at the same time, and then maybe I don't know if Michelin ever got into the F1 tire game. They do NASCAR, I know, but
Gotcha.
Or no, well, NASCAR I think has done Michelin and Goodyear. But anyway, yeah, there was a time when F1 had multiple tire providers.
And so not only are they providing the tires, but what is, I think, even more interesting about that is they've got to do a metric fuckload of research to determine, like, are these things safe? What is the distance that they can go at what temperatures for how long? Just like an insane amount of metrics that they're looking for research on. Now, I find it fascinating that, and we can probably get this date, but when they moved from these groove tires, even on the dry, to just full slicks and say, oh no, we only want grooves for when it's wet out. I think that's like kind of fascinating, and I'm curious if maybe those cars didn't work well with slicks, and they had tried it, because we're kind of at a time, we're just looking at a snapshot of one race. I don't know what the context of, what it was like around it. So I just thought that was interesting to see, Bridgestone tires with grooves in them. It's like, man, like, where are they getting their data from?
Well, yeah, and it's interesting. It probably has something to do with the cars and I to be honest, actually, this is what I would imagine it comes from. And I do this in conversation with Colleen sometimes, where I like to hypothesize why something became the way it was. So my hypothesis for this would be that the tires didn't have all the electronic sensors that they have in them now. Like in today's tires, we see AWS graphics of like the front right is at 30%, the front left's at 40%, the back two tires are at 50% or whatever. So maybe due to not having those sensors to be able to tell the wear on the tire, it was a visual way to see how much tire was left without being concerned about a tire blowing from like just wearing it too low. Like with the slicks, because there's no grooves, you're relying on that data on the car that's the car's feeding back to the pit lane. Like, oh, these tires still have some life, or oh, they're getting really short, like more so than just pure lap time basis. Like, oh, the tires seem to be falling off because you're driving slower. Like, it's more
right.
technologically available what the condition is. That's what I would imagine.
That seems like a pretty good educated guess. I would not be surprised if that, if that had factored in. But yeah, just as like an easy thing to say, well, wow, this is different. That was a big thing that I noticed here for this, for this Australian Grand Prix. And then another just thing that right at the start of the race I noticed or looked into was Takumo or Takuma
Sato.
Sato. This was his, I believe, this was his first year in Formula One,
Oh, okay.
racing for Jordan, who then goes on to have a a pretty medium career in Formula One, but then does great things in IndyCar. He's got a bunch of podiums, got a bunch of wins. So I just thought it was fascinating that we were watching this gentleman in his first season of Formula One. So I thought that was neat. But we had an interesting qualifying where we had Rubens Barrichello in one of the Ferraris get pole position to start it off. Behind him in P2, I believe was
It was Schumacher.
gotcha on the right side of the track, and then who was behind him?
Ralph Schumacher.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, that was the starting qualifying positions.
Yeah. So starting qualifying positions. Rubens, Michael, Ralph Schumacher.
Gotcha. So yeah, and then talk us through the start of the race. What went on there?
Well, initially there was another note that I found interesting, but Ferrari was using their 2001 car with just slight modifications to make it meet the 2002 rule requirements and everything. They had,
Oh, that's interesting.
so they said they were basically what they said ahead of the race was that, oh, we had some upgrades that we were putting onto the new 2002 car in progress, and if we had brought it without those, we wouldn't have been able to finish up whatever upgrades we were trying to do for the car, kind of thing. And so there's some speculation that they were just like, other teams were like, their car just wasn't ready. And so they come in with the 2001 car that they had just slightly modified and decide, hey, the pace was already good enough, so might as well just give it a shot, and we'll probably still be able to hang in the race. So that was an interesting part of it, but getting the race going, Rubens Barrichello gets a good start. Michael Schumacher does not get a great start, and his brother Ralph gets past him pretty quickly. As we're getting towards that very first turn, Rubens Barrichello shifts multiple times, it looks like, defending down the track. It didn't look like multiple moves in a braking zone, but Ralph Schumacher ends up ramping up the back of him, going flying, careening into the tire barrier, perfectly fine. But then another 6 other cars, totaling 8, end up bumping into each other, getting knocked out. And the safety things are interesting because with the old F1 regulations at the time, if there is a starting incident kind of thing like this, the drivers were able to go, every team had a third car available, a spare car that was set up for either of their drivers to use. And whoever, if there was an issue, they could use the spare car. So you're seeing, if the race is red flagged. So you're seeing drivers jump out of their cars, sprinting back to the pit lane while the race is still going, because they kept it under safety car instead of red flagging it. So none of these drivers end up even being able to restart and rejoin the race. So it's just craziness, and the thought of 8 drivers running into each other, then everyone hopping out of their their cockpit and running to the back to the pit lane as quickly as they can is just wild.
Yeah, it's almost like a triathlon. Just like, all right, on to the next phase. Get off these bikes and go for the swim now.
Yeah, it's crazy that they used to have that available, but like I said, they didn't end up red flagging the race. Some of the drivers, I think I was watching an interview with Rubens Barrichello that happened during the race, so shortly after the incident, and he was, of course, upset with Ralf Schumacher, saying that all he had to do was just like stay behind me and just like take P2. He hopped up a place already, so just hang in P2 in the into the first turn, but he got greedy kind of thing. He's like, he wouldn't have made the turn anyway at the speed he was going. But Barrichello also mentioned that the Formula One race director, Charlie Whiting, had kind of said that he didn't want to red flag races, keep the racing going and all, which I was saying to you I thought was interesting because he has also been the racing director for Formula One since 1997 up through 2019. So he kind of swung from this mayhem chaos, like doesn't seem super safe, to the creation of or like implementing some of these great Formula One creations and direction to avoid dangerous incidents on the track.
Yeah, like most notably, just in that time frame. So he would have been a part of the Halo project to
Yep.
get the ring around the drivers' heads, and that's like been huge.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen multiple incidents just in the past 2 years. We saw the incident between Max and Lewis where Max's car went up on top of Lewis's with a tire just kind of inches away from Lewis's head. That the Halo protected him there. Of course, this past season we saw Zhou Guan Yu get his car flipped and go careening across like upside down. So some very like big safety changes came under Charlie Whiting before he had passed in 2019. So definitely a interesting person that has been involved in Formula One that was there for this race as well. But kind of getting further on into the race, we had one of the highlights being Mark Webber. He was making his debut. He's an Australian. So first race at the Australian Grand Prix 2002, driving for Minardi, who he's talked about since then having been a very small and like a very small outfit for a team and a constructor. So the fact that he was able to kind of make it through this race, they weren't even sure coming into the race that he was going to end up making it the full distance, which is interesting. That some of these smaller outfits they were just not even necessarily concerned about getting points. They're like, we just want to finish the race. But they end up getting fifth place, 2 points for the team. Only the top 6 drivers would get points in this era, and there were only 6 drivers who finished. So a pretty good start, and one of the better starts for an Australian at the Australian Grand Prix. And obviously Mark Webber had a pretty successful F1 career.
Yeah, and especially from the Saturday where he qualifies P18 in the Minardi, the up front turn one skirmish was like the best thing for him on the day, especially where he's able to kind of keep his nose clean, make his way through the pileup, and then keep it moving. And he was kind of the the main story of the kind of the final section of the race, where he was hunting for the hunting for the P5 position, looking to stay away from Mika Salo and push up onto the Jaguar of Eddie Irvine, because once Michael Schumacher was kind of off into the distance, there wasn't much else to pay attention there for the casters. But an 18 to P5 is pretty good for that small outfit.
Yeah, very, very good. And him with the fight against Salo at the end, and holding him off, it was a very impressive way to kind of finish the first race for his first career race. So definitely cool to see. And in terms of Michael Schumacher, it was like you said, he kind of put some good distance. They gambled a bit, and a lot of the teams were switching over to the intermediate tires earlier on, but he just stayed out on the wets and hung out there a lot longer than any of the other drivers ended up. I think, and ended up pitting around lap 38, more than halfway through the race, and just being able to carry it on when a lot of the drivers were concerned early that it might be a two-stopper because of the changing weather.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was he still had a large lead. Even the stop would have had to go really wrong for him to really lose out in that scenario. What I thought was pretty impressive was David Coulthard making, where did he qualify? Much farther down from where he ended up.
Hmm.
So he qualified P4, but he was able, after the turn one shenanigans, he led the race for something like 10 laps, basically
Hmm.
through the safety car. But I don't know, something about that track was pretty difficult, because he went off a couple of times, and then behind him was the Renault of Jarno Trulli, who came up through,
Hmm.
and Michael Schumacher was ending up like putting pressure on Trulli. They're going around for a couple of laps, and I was I was wondering when it was going to happen, and after, I think it was like 3 or 4 laps of chasing, he just spins out, coming out of like a medium speed turn, and Michael just overtakes him, and he's gone. But so much pressure from Schumacher behind in the Ferrari, and yeah,
Yeah.
you. I was not surprised when he spun out. I literally said out loud, I was like, "Yep, that sucks." And
Yeah.
then he's gone. But it was a good effort, and it would have been impressive if he was able to keep him behind. But I did not think there was any chance. And then David Coulthard, after having like a pretty good kind of grab the reins of the race. I mean, he goes off the track another like 3 times, I'm pretty sure, and then just ends up, I'm pretty sure, retiring from the race after like his third
Yeah.
one or something similar. So yeah, just really tough for David on a day when like he could have made the best of it. Um, getting that advantage in the early stages of the race. Unfortunately for him, he ran off one time too many, I think.
Yeah, and so another rainy kind of day that we've looked at a race from. They seem to have a lot of the historically more kind of bizarre and races with more to talk about than some of the other ones throughout the years. But a fun one to look back at. I definitely enjoyed it. Another note: Kimi Räikkönen finished on the podium there, finishing in P3. So I think um, that was pretty early on in his career. I guess that was his second year in Formula One after 1 year with Sauber, moving to McLaren there. So
Gotcha. Yeah, and again, just kind of like seeing how things don't change for as much as how much they do change over the years is Kimi Räikkönen racing for McLaren, powered by Mercedes, which is pretty interesting. Same with his teammate David Coulthard. But yeah, it was a great podium for him. P3 just behind Juan Pablo Montoya, driving in the Williams BMW, and then Michael Schumacher drove off into the sunset to take P1 for that race.
Yeah, Juan Pablo Montoya, another famous Formula One and I believe IndyCar driver. If I'm remembering correct. Well, so he did NASCAR and IndyCar, so he
Mm-hmm.
kind of made all the rounds through the different racing series. So an interesting one to look back to. Any final notes for the 2002 Australian Grand Prix?
It's crazy to see what is that 16 for no, it's crazy to see 14 DNFs down the side of a like race classification and only a couple finishing.
Yeah,
That's like kind of well, if you didn't know what the story was, you would think it was actually like terrifying, like goddamn what happened, and exactly what you think happened, a massive pileup right at the start.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, it was definitely an interesting one. A couple of times, and this was kind of during the I guess when he was hunting down Montoya and then Tully afterwards is he had so much pace in hand where he was able and we said the same thing before where like he was looking at every opportunity taking different lines like kind of going doing like in and outs trying to find opportunities and you would
mm,
think if you're doing that like you're gonna lose time eventually like you're driving more of the circuit than the other person
right.
but I mean he was gaining time the whole time and sticking like right on the gearbox and that to me is fascinating because like just as a spectator I'm thinking like are you actually over driving in this scenario and the answer
Yeah,
is no obviously not because he gets the overtake but yeah it's a very aggressive driving style.
yeah, and it just the intuition and I guess like feel of being able to know in those conditions like where he was still within the limit and being able to pick up time maybe on what would have been the standard racing line as opposed to the wet day racing line
Mm-hmm.
is very impressive from Michael Schumacher. It kind of adds more to his um, fame of being a great wet weather driver. My only other interesting thing that I was thinking about was just looking at the different engine suppliers for the teams. I found
Mm-hmm.
kind of interesting seeing BMW, Cosworth, Asia Tech in there. Just a number of vehicles or a number of engine manufacturers that we're not used to seeing. So I found
Mm-hmm.
that pretty interesting. But I think that's all else I had for the race review.
Yeah, I just think it was quite a fun one to watch. We had some interesting like rules stuff going on with the third car that they
Mm,
might have had access to. So I think that's interesting. We have obviously just like shenanigans with the crashes and stuff. That's always
yeah,
like funny. A bunch of safety car stuff. So yeah, it was quite the dynamic race I would say and seeing one of the greats just do their thing is always fun to watch. So yeah, that was the 2002 Australian Grand Prix, little classic race review there in the off season. But speaking of the off season, we were looking into just some like general esports notes that we can talk about. We've got some LCS roster moves that we can go through. But one thing that I found really interesting coming out of this week was now we know the name from the TSM League of Legends kind of division. Parth Nadu launches a research company and for like player development and organization development, and they sign Immortals as their first client, looking to improve the world of esports. A consultancy company known as Cedo.
yeah, and a pretty interesting thing. you and I were talking about kind of some of the capacities, I guess, that some of the larger teams have, the different organizational members that they've hired on, whether it's a mental coach or lane coaches or other like psychology, like sports psychologists, different people who will help the players to perform at their best. And so I think starting a company like this allows some of the smaller teams to have access to some of those similar support people for their team and everything without necessarily having to hire them on full time. They're still able to develop players and everything, and hopefully create more competition and maybe develop more good players over time for the LCS region as a whole.
Yeah, and like the other angle of it is, okay, so maybe this venture into it doesn't really work that well, and maybe it's like kind of a a crash, but it does point us a little more in that direction that we've been talking about of North America improving their infrastructures and doing some of the things that maybe the bigger organizations like out of China and Korea are, and this could be a step forward in that direction if more veterans from the esport want to set up companies like this to help grow it and give access to these organizations that are looking to compete in these series. Yeah, I think it's a just good for League of Legends itself. I think it seems pretty good for the direction for North America. And yeah, we'll see what kind of benefit it can have, and maybe it will encourage other individuals who have veteran status to maybe get involved in this way and like share their expertise and share what they've learned and share what they know, because that's the only way that you're ever gonna like level up the scene as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. And like work, like you were saying, working with kind of the ground level too, with they're looking to work with a lot of like student programs and whatnot, and just building the infrastructure, building the player base of competitive players, I think is definitely a good thing. And so definitely exciting to see that Parth is getting involved in that after managing a team and having multiple years of kind of seeing the behind the scenes of what and maybe growth of what benefits and helps some of the players. So
Yeah, so I just thought that was an interesting headline. Looking forward to it, and we'll see maybe if Mortals can improve their slot with their help. They're looking to make some changes going into the spring split, picking up a new mid laner, a new bottom laner. Looks like they've got a new support, bringing in a new coach as well. So maybe this is all part of the Immortals plan.
yeah, it might be, but it'll be interesting to see if that kind of impacts them, especially with a couple of players who have lingered around that like top of academy, bottom of LCS range with a Blaze Olive and Tactical. I think that will hopefully give them a little bit of a boost. But talking about just a few other roster changes in the LCS. So Cloud9 has officially announced their new mid laner. So they'll have Diplex, who is coming from Vitality B, the I guess kind of academy roster for Vitality in the LEC, now EMEA. So he will be joining as the mid laner. He has some decent kind of performances through the different I guess like leagues he's played in. He's had some third place, fourth place finishes. He had a first place finish in the Coupe de France 2022. So he's had some smaller success, but it'll be interesting to see on the big stage. I think Cloud9 does a pretty good job of scouting out players as they've seen, and even maybe in some instances, if they don't have the maybe best player, they still get the best performance they can out of them due to that infrastructure that they've built. So I'm hoping that he'll be able to come in and maybe he'll be a young talent that looks pretty good in the LCS. And I don't know if there's too many mid laners that will really dominate him necessarily. I don't feel like the LCS has a ton of super aggressive trying to dominate lane mid laners right now, so it might be a good time for him to develop on the Cloud9 roster.
Well, and he may not even be looking to play that kind of style either. Looking at his champion pool, top champs from the 2022 spring season was 4 games on Twisted Fate, 4 games on Vex, 3 games on Oriana. So really just kind of looking for kind of like playing for the team, looking to roam top and bottom on the Twisted Fate, and then just provide like general utility on the Vex and the Oriana. So yeah, I think he'll likely slot in fine to the Cloud9 kind of system and plan. So yeah, looking forward to see how he does.
Yeah, and so along with him, Dignitas has some roster moves that they made, and so I'm looking forward to them. I think they're going to have a very competitive team if they can find a good North American or LCS region bot laner because they signed Armit and Ignar, who are both would be considered imports at the moment. But they have Jensen and Santorin as their mid-jungle duo. 2 players that are really good veterans who have had phenomenal performances in the past couple of years. Jensen, great performances on Team Liquid as well as Cloud9. Santorin having some really solid play on FlyQuest. I'm trying to think, was he... Santorin was also with who else was he with recently?
Santorin was on
Liquid. So he had FlyQuest and Liquid for 3 years. So he played with Jensen already. They'll be pairing back up. So I think they have a pretty good start to their roster so far.
Yeah, it looks like they're just looking for a bottom laner, and they may be looking to pick up a secondary support. They have Biofrost from summer. I don't know if they're looking to
I think he's still technically contracted, but hasn't been announced as whether he's staying with the team or not.
Gotcha. So then, yeah, they're just looking for a bottom laner. But yeah, I thought Armit was quite a strong top laner there for Mad Lions. Obviously, their Worlds run this year was like pretty solid, and also the split that they had leading up to Worlds was really good. I think Armit kind of thrived in the 2022 meta. So just looking forward to see what he can do for them, because yeah, that's a really strong top side at least. And Ignar is a solid support as well. So I think they have the makings for a pretty strong team.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. But another team that made some big moves was Team Liquid. We know they kind of dropped their big, expensive, crazy roster that they had with Santorin, Bjergsen, Hans Sama, Core JJ, and Boipo. And so they have signed on Summit from FPX. They signed on Pioshik from DRX over from the LCK. They have a new mid laner, Hyri from Oceania, and then Yeon from North America. So they've started to build a team with some pretty strong Korean talent, along with Marin as their head coach. I think that's a pretty solid start for Team Liquid's roster, kind of going and shifting from 5 maybe veteran star kind of players to having a couple of talented players and maybe some players that are up and coming with their mid lane and bot lane.
Yeah, and a lot of experience coming out of Korea. Obviously Marin used to play for SKT, Pioshik, Summit, both Koreans as well. So I think a lot of that's just a big change for that organization. Where Bjergsen, Santorin, and Core JJ were all Um, North American players, and then they had two European players. This is kind of a big change there for the organization, but the pedigree cannot be doubted. So yeah, looking forward to see how that roster does.
Yeah, I think it will be very interesting to see. I think they have a lot of talent. Then, of course, down in the academy, there's still a lot of talented players that we've seen before who are down there. Zazel, Diamond, two supports that have played for Cloud9. You were saying Svenskeren, Hanser, Wild Turtle, all on TSM Academy. So a number of those players who are still kind of performing and playing in the academy. Maybe we will see at some point back in LCS. So
Yeah, just getting the reps in still, and that may be just like, hey, they enjoy playing more than they care about having like a starting slot or whatever it is. But yeah, just glad that they're still playing and jamming games.
yeah, and so it's nice to see them. But a lot of big changes up in the LCS. It's going to be
Yeah.
an interesting spring split for sure. So looking forward to that coming up. And over to, I guess, some Magic the Gathering talk. You had some new cards that came in. I know you wanted to talk about a little bit.
Oh yeah. So I just wanted to give a big old thank you, shout out, whatever you want to say, to the artist Yoji Shinkawa. He was an artist for the Metal Gear games. Did a bunch of concept art, and like you could see it in like the what are they called, the like the guidebooks and stuff. Just beautiful artist. Did a secret lair with magic for a bunch of artifact cards. Skull Clamp, Phyrexian Metamorph, Tezzeret the Seeker, and a Solemn Simulacrum. And they are just beautiful. They came in today with with their little secret card in the back, and I've just been admiring them all day. They're absolutely beautiful with the borderless treatment, with the art going all the way to the edges. It is just super clean. Most of those pieces are going into Commander Deck Rona, Disciple of Gix, where she's like an artifacts matters, historic cards matter. So historic cards are artifacts, legendaries, and sagas. So she can return historic cards from the graveyard and you can cast them again. Now, what's interesting about a lot of these cards, I think a problem with the deck traditionally has been drawing cards, just in general, refilling my hand. It's struggled doing that. But a bunch of the cards I was able to slot in, Skull Clamp specifically. So Skull Clamp is an artifact equipment. You pay one generic mana for. It says equipped creature gets +1/-1. Whenever equipped creature dies, draw 2 cards. So, in a deck that's looking to make a bunch of 1/1 Thopters or 1/1 Servos or whatever it is, that Skull Clamp I can equip for 1 mana, kill the 1/1, draw 2 cards. Equip it to another 1/1, draw 2 cards. So, it is going to be hopefully the card draw engine that I've been looking for in this deck. Because otherwise, I think it's a lot of fun. I think it plays really well. And I just enjoy the theme. I just enjoy the deck a whole lot. If you remember, I was talking about I was talking about the Tezzeret Master of the Bridge. Got a big old W with that card earlier, so I think it'll be fun to slot in some Secret Lair cards to really power it up, give it a little bit of flavor, and improve it where it did have some weaknesses. To be fair.
Nice. That's awesome. And like having not just cards that you can slot in, but pretty cool looking ones is definitely nice. And so, like you said, with the skull clamp, being able to add that in, and then so I'm assuming you can only equip it to one like thopter or character or card at a time, correct?
Yeah, but once it gets equipped, that thing's going to die, meaning the skull clamp is no longer
Right.
equipped. So as
But
long as you
then
have creatures and the mana, you can just keep it going down the line.
gotcha. So it's not like it's or put to the graveyard when the creature dies.
Correct. It stays
Okay.
on the battlefield.
Because my thought was then, even if that was the case, because it's an artifact, you'd be able to bring it on using, you said Anora is the
Rona, Disciple of
Rona.
Gix is the commander name.
Rona. So being able to have Rona bring it back, but I guess if it is not, doesn't get sent to the graveyard, then that's not necessary. But even if it gets like exile or sent there for some other reason, you can bring it back.
Yeah, lots of synergy there. I think it's really going to help me like churn through my deck, find the not like there's no combos in the deck, but like help me get to like critical mass of a board state, to where I can just start like sacking things for value or like really start slapping players with some flying damage or whatever it is.
Nice.
So just like really super stoked on these cards. The Secret Lair treatment is beautiful, and they have a wonderful home here in my Blue Black Artifacts Matters Commander deck.
Love it. And yeah, the picture you sent me, they look awesome. So definitely cool, and I'm sure you're excited to have gotten them in the mail. So
Yeah,
that's awesome.
and then if you see on the top right, so that's the Synapse Sliver. That's the seeker card. Obviously has nothing to do with artifacts or anything like this, but it is super sweet. So 4 and a blue for a sliver creature that says whenever a sliver deals combat damage to a player, its controller may draw a card. In that commander deck that I have, drawing cards is one of the problems. So to hit that as the seeker card, I was over the moon and just super happy. I think that card commands a pretty penny just for the powerful effect. So I was very happy to see that as my secret card. But yeah, the Secret Lair always a fun experience, I have to say.
Nice, very cool. So awesome additions to some of your Magic collection and your decks. I'm looking forward to hopefully hearing you get to use them in some games. I know you didn't get much in this past week, but maybe over the holidays there will be a little more free time for everyone. But yeah, we will take a quick break and then be back with the flavor of the week.
Cool.
All right, and so we are back. We've got the flavor of the week for you this week. But Justin, let's hear what you've been having for food, some music. What's been going on? What have you been listening to?
Little bit of a different one here just because pretty boring here. So my visual medium, we finished up 24 season 1, and boy was that season finale just super exciting, and obviously rolled right into the next one, season 2. So 24 is quite exciting, and me and Sarah are very much enjoying it. So that's my visual medium here for the week. My food is not one specific meal, but just the idea of holiday meal planning in general. So our schedule is going to look a little bit different this year. So what we decided, we were trying to come up with like a meal either for the day, or we took the following Monday off, like something for that. And I was like, yeah, that would be cool, but why don't we come up with something to cook on Saturday that we can do leftovers like on Sunday and Monday of. So instead of like wasting, an hour and a half or 2 hours preparing a meal, cooking, and then whatever, we can just do all that work on the Saturday before. And then so when we've got to be places and spending time with people, it's already taken care of. We don't got to waste time. And then planning for something that like we can go after a couple times that'll reheat really well. So kind of taking a different angle on maybe like the next week's meal planning,
Okay.
to ease Sarah's plate a little bit more, because she
Yeah.
does a lot of the cooking, a lot of the prepping. So I think that'll be a way to kind of shift the burden a little bit.
Yeah, and for the holidays too, when there's like probably extra cooking and things going on to take to someone's house or to like whatever, like adding all that onto normal life cooking, it can be a lot. So it's nice that you guys are thinking of like, hey, this is our game plan for the
Mm-hmm.
next week. So nice, very
Yeah,
cool.
just a couple of steps ahead there. And then my music slash interesting thing I was listening to this week. I've put a couple hours into a couple of podcasts talking about like games, game theory, and like the programming of games, and using AI to like better learn about these games, or like test them against like real players or whatever it is, and just kind of going on deep dives into those topics. And it's been just super fascinating and really engaging, listening to, I believe the guy's name is Todd Howard, who's the art like the lead game designer for a couple of games from Bethesda, notably
Hmm,
Oblivion and Skyrim. I
very
believe he
cool.
also worked on like Arena and Daggerfell. So like he's knows what he's doing as far as game development. So hearing like a bunch of his angles and his ideas and like what he finds beautiful and all of that, was just super fascinating and really interesting to listen to. So that's
Nice.
my kind of interesting thing to listen to for the week.
Very cool. That
Mm.
that has to be, especially coming from someone like Skyrim and Oblivion are huge games, let alone like pretty well done and games that people think of pretty highly in terms of
Hmm.
their quality. So that has to be an interesting perspective to get. Um, but for my flavor of the week, so for my food this week, Colleen and I did an easy dinner tonight. We got halal from a food truck for dinner, and it's always just really good. We've had some cooking and whatnot over the past week, but it was a nice like way to end my kind of relaxed day, to not have to cook dinner and or anything. Even though I enjoy it, it's not that I like feel like it's a weight or an obligation. I like to cook dinner, but it was nice to just like not worry about that when I was just having a day of not worrying about stuff. So definitely nice. For my music, I've been getting into, now that we're in the Christmas week, I'm listening to more
Hmm.
Christmas music and all. I'm not the biggest Scrooge in the world, but Colleen was playing some electronic Christmas music earlier while we were out driving. It was cool. It was some like classic um, like Come O Come Emmanuel, like the hymn and stuff, like turned into some like electronic like EDM type stuff, which was cool.
Very cool.
So something just a little different. I like, as I've said, keeping some mixture of my Christmas music in my life. But for my visual medium, I think it's an interesting one. I watched through a Netflix documentary series called Ancient Apocalypse,
Okay.
and so this is a series that is narrated and primarily focused around Graham Hancock's kind of pseudo scientific and hypothetical history about the world. He's been on Joe Rogan's podcast a few times, So Joe Rogan is highlighted a couple times with little like snippets throughout the series, but it's interesting. He's someone who essentially believes that there is a like history that we have lost prior to as far back as we can remember, so that there were civilizations that and little pyramids, artifacts, things through around the world that have been found to potentially been there since like 9500 BC, around the last ice age, that at some point would have been wiped out by some sort of apocalypse essentially and restarted in what we have as our current like history and beliefs, with like the Mayans and some of the Mesopotamians and some of what we consider to be like ancient civilizations.
Yeah. Well, that's cool.
So it's interesting. It's like they talk about it. You get to see a lot of neat like historical like architectural sites from around the world. Göbekli Tepe is one that is like dated to supposedly be back to like 9500 BC. So they go and talk about that, along with like I think 4 or 5 other like pretty large ancient sites, including ones that have gone underwater, supposedly from the ice melting from the ice age and raising water levels and sea levels. They mention that vaguely that Atlantis could have actually been a real city that was like sunk under the rising sea levels and whatnot. So it's an interesting documentary. Obviously, a lot of it is just up for conjecture and hypothetical, but I find those kinds of documentaries like interesting to look at, like history and kind of how we view it. Especially like some of the ancient history, I find kind of cool to look into.
Yeah, because whether or not the individual's thesis is correct, it's fun to explore those places and like kind of contend with those ideas and maybe get a glimpse to where some of these like folklore myths or legends would have come from,
Right.
if they were in fact based on this story of a civilization that now we lump it into this like lore myth story, but when in fact, like, oh no, it was like a people, they lived here.
Well, yeah, and it can even
Right.
like kind of in some ways, if that is the case, explain some of the other things that we've seen throughout different historical things, even like religious like scriptures and things like that, whether you're looking at like a great flood, which could be the rising of seawaters from the melting of like ice age glaciers and whatnot, is something that could be or that it's a flood of some sort of something that is across a number of different religions and historical texts and things like that are believed to be out there. So it kind of can explain some of these things. So it's an interesting hypothesis at least, and so it's kind of fun to play around with those ideas. But yeah, so that's my visual medium for this week. I thought that was pretty cool to watch. But
Well, let me just derail a little further here.
okay,
Have you ever encountered, and this I believe is the basis for the show Ancient Aliens? Have you
okay,
ever encountered? So there was a guy who was doing a lot of that seminal work. His name was Eric Von Daniken. He wrote a book called Chariots of the Gods, where he basically just like compiles like his most compelling evidence and puts forth a thesis that says we have been visited before, and here's where it's been documented by these ancient peoples. Right? It is a beautiful idea and it's laid out wonderfully.
yeah,
But overall, it is just kind of like, all right, but let me see let me see
I
the hard and factuals.
right, definitely. It's I think that the idea of ancient civilizations that experienced some sort of apocalypse due to the ice age or around that time is
Hmm.
a little more believable for me than like visited by aliens and then never visited again except for these occasional UFO sightings. I don't
Yeah.
know, but I think that like there are a lot of things that could potentially be attributed to that, like that we still don't necessarily have answers for. There's still
Hmm.
always questioning into like how were the Great Pyramids built, and how
Hmm.
were some of these things like lined up so precisely and exactly with the astrological signs or the
Hmm.
coordinates of north, south, east, and west, or whatever else. And so I think that the idea that maybe there were some ancient historical things that were passed down that maybe we lost in the fire of the Library of Alexandria or different things like that, I find a little more believable, because I obviously I think humans are pretty impressive in a lot of ways in terms of our technological advancements.
Hmm.
The fact that there could have been an ancient civilization is an interesting thought. So I enjoyed watching it and just like kind of tickling those parts of my brain that are like, that's kind of cool,
Oh
maybe.
yeah, dude, the big what if, man, it's fun.
Yeah,
And
because
especially
it's
when they have you like world hopping and you're in a desert, you're in this forest now, check out these
yeah.
ancient ruins. You're like, oh, dude,
Oh,
yes.
I love it. And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
none of it makes any difference whatsoever in my life, too. So it's like, I get to just enjoy it. It's not like something that is gonna make me be like, oh, I like get super into it. I'm just like, oh, this is fun to think about. It's cool to watch.
Mm,
So
that's
I
neat.
definitely enjoyed that. But that is my flavor of the week, and so that does bring us to the end of this week's episode.
Yes, sir.
Keep an eye out for announcements. I don't know over the holidays kind of what our schedules will be like, so there may be some weeks off here or there, but we'll announce that out on our Twitter. But of course, like I said, check us out on Twitter. You can find us at Tall and Short of One, the number one. Listen to us on Spotify, Google Podcasts. We are on YouTube as well. But thank you again, week after week, for listening. We really appreciate it and enjoy doing this. And as we're coming up to the end of another year of doing this, it's kind of neat to look back and get to just see another year in the books of enjoying putting this out. So
Yeah, and I think some pretty neat improvements along the way here as we just kind of learn about the thing that we're doing, and just learn about Formula One in general. I think it will continue to improve. So yeah, just thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Have a safe and wonderful holiday season wherever you are celebrating, whatever you're doing. Be safe. Have fun. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for supporting the tall and short of it. This has been another episode in the books for 2022. Thank you, everybody.
peace out. Happy holidays.
Peace out. Later, everyone.